Right, sorry about that. I had to stop. Sorry, the battery ran out first in the camera. Typical Sony. So I've just, but I had to stop at a petrol station. So when I set off, right, so when I set off, it said 650 mile range. I've travelled 278 miles and almost ran out of petrol. So it's not even doing 42. It's not even doing 42 miles to the gallon. Now, it has been very windy, but there have been crosswinds in the most part, and I'm just wondering whether the lane assist with the crosswinds, and I believe it uses brakes on the wheel, on the steering, so I've switched that off. Well, I had to switch it off because I thought I was going to run out of petrol. Now, in a 2008, it does about 45 to the gallon, and it's a 1.2 petrol turbo, 130 horsepower. It was a very nippy car, but never. It used to use about just under half a tank for this same trip, and I've just used a full tank, which is 40 litres for 278 miles. So if that's the norm, maybe it's because it's windy, maybe it's because the car's brand new, I'm not sure. But if that's the norm, then this car gets about 30 miles to the gallon ish, which is very disappointing for a hybrid. You pay a lot more for a hybrid than you do a normal petrol car of the same kind of standard. Hold on, it's 50. So I'm just wondering how that can be, if you know what I mean. So I've just got to slow down. So the petrol consumptions on this car
in 1/4 mile, keep right to South Devon Link Road.
Right. So the petrol consumption on this car is worse, a lot worse than my BMW X5. Now, I find that hard to believe. So I've
keep right to South Devon Link Road.
I've got to assume that there's a problem with it.
Continue 3.5 miles on South Devon Link Road.
So I will contact the sorry, I'm just setting the cruise. It's a 50 and everybody's doing 50. So it must be like loads of cameras. Yeah, so it must be the case that either there's a problem with the car or it's the wind. The wind can make a big difference, I'm sure of that. But it's just it's much less than expected. Now, the speedo, the trip computer on this car is completely unreliable. So basically, it's telling me I've got a 650 mile range, and it wasn't quite empty, but it was. But the problem with it, the range, which is now showing 348, because I had to top up on the motorway, so I didn't top it all the way up because of the rip-off prices. But it's now showing 348 miles. But at one point, it was showing 120 miles, and then 2 miles later, it was showing 90. So I can't rely on that level of error, if you know what I mean. So I just pulled in at the motorway services and just put in 20 litres. I mean, that's half a tank. But if this is saying 348 miles, I think you can truly say it's more like 150, if that. So from it showing 650 to having travelled 270 miles to then showing 90. So it should have been 500. So it's telling me I could do 550 miles in the time I did 270. So that's what, 274, 540. So it's actually half. This is showing half of the actual range that you can get from the car in these conditions. Now I've been driving at 70 miles an hour on the motorway on the cruise control. I've had the lane departure assist operating. I don't know whether that makes a difference. I'll have to check all that. But at the end of the day, 42. It's indicating 42.9, and I don't think it's. I'll have to calculate that. But I think even that's overstating the actual real mileage I'm getting. So that's disappointing. But it is the first trip I've done, and it's certainly the first long trip I've done. So obviously I'm going to have to do this same kind of analysis on different trips. Now for this week I'll be here all week, and I'll be driving maybe 20 miles a day, and then I'm gonna as soon as I get there, I'm gonna reset the trip computer to see what it actually does get. But if it carries on like this, it's the most least fuel economical car I've ever had. Oh, well, not ever had, but ever had for, you know, since the days of, you know, Vauxhall Vivas and carburetors and, you know, blah blah blah. Everything else, it's so comfortable. Yeah, the total journey is going to be about 280 miles, which is not a massive distance, but it is for the UK. I mean, you can get practically from most parts of England to the other part with roughly around about 3 to 350 miles. So this is a long UK journey. But what surprised, it's just surprised me, the fuel consumption and the fact that
in 1/4 mile, make a slight right turn onto Hamlin Way.
Yeah. So you know, so basically, I was actually getting nervous that I was going to run out of fuel, and that's because the fuel gauges just simply don't tell you. They're not accurate at all. So I expected, before I started this journey, which might have been a bit hopeful, that I'd get the
Continue
650.
1/4 mile on the A3022, then go straight ahead.
So I thought I'd get 650 or thereabouts. You know, you can't, you know, these things are a bit, you know, they're a bit hit and miss. I mean, I think you're supposed to get about 60 miles to the gallon, according to their figures.
In 200 yards, go straight ahead onto Riviera Way.
60 miles to the gallon is more than I expected. You know, in real life, the indicated 43, so that's per gallon, so that's 4.6 litres. So it's doing 43 miles. So if I've got 40 litres, I should be able to get 430 miles. And I've barely got to, I mean, it wasn't empty, but I've barely got 270, or in fact 260. So that's spectacularly less than expected. So I would say
go straight ahead onto Riviera Way.
Even with the gauge indicating 43 miles to the gallon, it's not getting that. It's getting about 30 off the top of my head, but I can calculate that. But it was the rate at which it was going down that worried me. So 1 minute it's showing a range of 150.
In 200 yards, make a U-turn.
Yeah. Right, okay, that's wrong. I know where I am and where I'm going now. But by the way, that's another thing with this navigation. I don't want this discussion to be negative, because
when possible, make a U-turn.
Right, there's if I could switch that off. If I knew how to switch it off, I would do. You know, that, and then big X. All right, good. Right, so if I could make, if I told you all of the good things about this trip so far, there's lots of things, and I think I've tried to highlight a few of them. But if you buy a hybrid, you do expect it to be good on fuel. Now I know it's a 1.5 litre petrol engine, and on the motorway you're going to be using mostly petrol, I guess, mostly the petrol engine. But even a 1.5 litre, I had a 3 litre engine in my X5, and I got a lot better than this. and that's a very big, heavy car, although it was diesel. With the Peugeot 288, which is a petrol engine, 1.2 litre turbo petrol, 130 horsepower, this trip would have taken just under half a tank, and that's good. And I estimate that to be around about 45 miles to the gallon. This, and it might have been a 50 litre tank, I'm not sure. This one takes, I believe it's a 40 litre tank, and I was almost on empty. So that is not what I expect. It's certainly not what I expect. And I'll of course contact the dealer about that. Most people seem to think you should be getting around about 50. So if you go onto the Honda Jazz Club forum, in a Crostar, they're getting less than a Honda EX, but not much less. You know, it's a few miles per gallon. But it's nowhere near 60. So these they were supposed to revise these new figures from the old ones, which were completely useless, in a absolutely perfect driving conditions on a rolling road. This is supposed to give you a number of figures, some of it, part of it based on motorway, part of it around town, of course, where a hybrid's going to give you the most, the least consumption because of the electric part. But on a motorway journey, this is absolutely pathetic. But more pathetic than that, and more worrying, it's not that it has a very high fuel consumption for a car of this size, but the fact that this display, the Speedo, does not give you any form of anywhere near accurate information on your actual fuel consumption. Now, if it said at the start of the journey the range was 650 and I got 550 or even 500, I would think, all right, fair enough. We're sort of used to being conned in a way. We're used to being conned by these fuel figures. But for it to say 650 range and then 275 miles later you feel the need that you've got to put fuel in the tank, and you're putting fuel in the most expensive prices on the map, it's something like 170 a litre. I mean, even in the local garages are 149, but that's still a lot more because they've got you by the short and curlies. So you set off thinking you're going to be able to get, I set off thinking I'd be able to get there and nearly back, and I couldn't even get there. So that's a major downside. And I can only imagine, you know what, I've had a couple of thoughts on why it might be the case. I was thinking that the lane assist, whatever it is, assist, which I believe uses brakes, as I mentioned earlier, if that's constantly tapping the brakes, obviously it's going to affect the fuel consumption. But I wouldn't have thought that to implement that feature to massively affect the fuel consumption. I mean, they may have done. I'll find out, because probably what I'll do is when I do the long journey back, then I may well decide not use it, and then see what the differences are. I mean, it may well make a difference. I mean, wind, or heavy winds. And they have been pretty blustery. I wouldn't say that they weren't like the other day where they were hurricane force. But wind resistance is gonna. I mean, this is a tall car. It's a little bit taller than the Honda Jazz EX. But I'd expect the wind resistance to have some difference. But I mean, if you're travelling at 70 miles an hour, even on a still day, you're creating 70 mile an hour in winds. Do you know what I mean? So on a normal day, then you'd expect a heavier wind to have some effect. I mean, I accept that. But on would you expect that much? I don't know. I mean, I'll have to, when I go back, hopefully the last of the storms, well, I'll wait until the storms have subsided, and then basically test whether it does have that kind of effect. It might well do. I'm not sure. But what I might do while I'm here is just pop into a local Honda garage and ask their advice, as long as it's free. And I think they'd at least, even if they don't, if they tell you that, oh, it must be a problem, it's still under warranty. I mean, now it's only got 327 miles on the clock. When I set off this morning, it was 40. You know, so that's the kind of mileage it's done. And of course, the engine is brand new. It's the first time it's been for a long run out. These might all have an impact, but I still, even putting all of that together, I still would not have expected to have such poor mileage. And I think we are talking 30 miles. This is saying 43.2. I think we're talking. Well, it must be a full tank to stopping for fuel, and it wasn't completely empty. But I was starting to worry that because I can't rely on the gauge, the fuel gauge, I was starting to worry that I would run out of fuel. And so I only had 40 miles to go, and I stopped at the service and topped it up because I prefer to be safe than sorry. The last thing I want to do is run out of fuel and then sit there for hours waiting for somebody to roadside assist or whoever they are. So it's 12:30. The navigator tried to take me to London and round the M25 from Sheffield to Devon, which were 350 miles, I think he said. So I just ignored it. It's a Garmin navigator, but every I mean, I've done this trip many times. My son lives in Torquay, and every Navi I've had in the past, Navi, that's what they say in Germany. Every GPS I've had in the past has taken me on the A42, M42, down the M5. This thing wanted to take me down the M1, round the M25 and up the M4. So you've got to be a bit savvy if you don't know where you're going. This thing could take you anywhere. But that might be the settings as well. So it might say I don't know, that's certainly not the quickest route, but it might say take the motor, you know, take all motorways or whatever it is. But I'll tell you what, I wasn't impressed with the sat nav. It's not something I use very often, but I do put it on this journey because it gives you the last one I had, it was pretty good. It gives you diversions if there was a problem. So if there was a problem, roadworks or whatever it is, it might divert you around that little bit. But what it doesn't do in the first place is say, right, travel 170 miles down the M1, 30 miles around the worst part of the M25 towards Heathrow towards the M4, and then up the M4 and presumably joining the M5 when you can cut across. You know, it takes about 45 minutes to cut across from the M1 to the M5, and then it's you just follow your nose. So you got to be careful with that as well. But like I said, let's say this is part one. I haven't read the manual, well, I've had to skip through, you know, those starter guides that you get in a couple of YouTube videos, and you know, blah blah blah. Oh, hold on, road closed. I'm gonna ask this guy actually. Mate, is it that road that's closed? Can you get up this road at all?
No, you've got to go back.
Well, what's the lights there for then?
Eh?
What are they? Do you know why have they put the lights there?
Well, because they're doing work on the other building site as well.
Oh God, how do you get around this then?
Yes, everywhere you go around here at the minute is road work.
Oh right, do you know how to get round it? I'm trying to get to Brixham.
Trying to get to
Brixham?
Yeah, if you go back.
Yeah.
To the traffic lights by the station there, you know where the station is? You have to turn left there and follow up round and come out the other side.
Oh, I know.
They've taken a railway bridge out, that's what they've done.
Ah, okay, right. Thanks a lot, mate. All the best.
Yeah, it's a nightmare.
Right. So they put lights. I suppose people live here or whatever. So they put the lights on, and then you go through the lights, and then 100 metres later the road's closed. Oh, nice view on the old reversing camera. I can't complain about that. I don't really want to complain about this car at all, because it's a lovely drive. But the nice chap, very helpful. Yeah, so I don't want to complain about it at all, but it's so comfortable, and you know, that is the longest journey. It's not obviously not the longest I've ever done, but I don't normally take breaks, but I've had to stop a couple of times. First of all for the air, and then secondly for the well, the first one, you know, they didn't have any air. This guy's going to come anyway. And then I stopped to get fuel, so I've stopped 3 times. Normally I don't like to stop at all, unless I'm bursting for a PP, which I can usually hold for a few hours. But yeah, I mean, it drives well, I have to say. You know, I'm not one of, you know, I'm not like Jeremy Clarkson or any of these reviewers. Oh, I don't like this, I don't like the fact that it's plastic. So what? But I do like a comfortable car. Right, so you said go left here. Right, where to? Right, that's right. So right, you can't set the sat nav. Oh, that's taking me to Brixham. Right, go. I'm staying in Brixham.
Keep right to Falkland Road. Keep right to Falkland Road.
Oh, you know what? That's taking me back to where of course that's taking me back to where I've just been. God, we're in the middle of nowhere, and then I pull up for 10 seconds and suddenly it's like Piccadilly Circus. I'm telling you, this road is not wide enough for 2 Honda Jazzers. Wouldn't like to drive a caravan. Yeah, anyway, I'll follow the diverted traffic signs. Right, so back to the...
Turn left onto Wheatridge Lane, then
left.
make a slight right turn.
That's the guy that gave me the advice. He must be a bit sprightly. He looks to be in his late 70s. Okie dokie. Right, well, that was about 2 miles to, and they've closed about 30 metres of road. Anyway, I digress. Yeah, I don't want to say anything bad about this car. I need to get this. I need to get a professional view on this mileage, because that's not good enough. And it's certainly not what the people are reporting. So let's put that to one side, because I've talked it to death. What's it like to drive? Absolutely brilliant. As good as any car I've ever driven. And I've driven, you know, some fairly luxurious. I mean, Porsche is an expensive car, but it's not luxurious in the sense that it's very, very uncomfortable.
In 200 yards, turn left onto Orient
I
Road.
know where I'm going now, so I can just press this X. Yeah, so it's an expensive car, but it's not comfortable, and it hasn't got the gadgets either. You know, I mean, it's a manual. Obviously, you don't want to. You buy a Porsche, you don't buy an automatic for a start, because you're boy racer and all that. Although I was 40, I was still kind of a boy racer in my mind. And then honestly, the best car, and people will hate me for this, is a BMW X5. I've only had one BMW, and it was an X5. They're not 4x4s, they're limousines. I mean, if you can't compare it to, for example, a Land Cruiser. I mean, a Land Cruiser we needed, because we were up in the Taunus Mountains. I mean, mountains about 3,000 feet. Mountains by UK standards. Snow, blah, blah, blah. And a Land Cruiser, I used to weave in and out of all the X5s that were stuck. No problem at all. And it had like this thing where you could press it, and he did it all for you. It will go up a mountain. Something control. and that was quite, it had leather seats, this and the other. Worst thing about that is a Land Cruiser is designed to get you to where you want to go, whether that's across a desert, a mountain range, or whatever. It doesn't have advanced suspension or anything. And so if you're driving down a motorway, which is not what it's built for, you have to constantly turn the steering wheel to keep it in a straight line. And I think it's because it's just got this very solid, reliable, old-fashioned kind of steering and steering system and suspension, blah blah blah. So you can strike that one off for comfort, although it was very handy where we lived at the time. The X5, useless off-road. Not that I ever took it off-road, but crap in snow as well, and that was with snow tyres on, because it's a limousine. It's got wonderful suspension, fantastic seats, all the gadgets, of course, that this has got now, probably didn't have then. I can honestly say, if I won the lottery or whatever, as a second car, I'd get probably a BMW X5. It's a heavy car, clunky doors, this and the other. These are not bad actually. They're not. They're a little bit tinny compared to an £80,000, £90,000 car, but you're only paying 20 grand for it. So what do you expect? And but very comfortable. There is road noise. You probably wouldn't get in a X5, and I'm not comparing it to an X5, obviously. You can buy 4 of these for the price of the X5 I had in today's money. But you can compare kind of the difference. Now, is it worth the extra money for the difference? No, it's not. It's absolutely not worth the extra money, and unless you've got money to burn. But if you've got that, you might as well get a Bentley or something. I'm sure they're even more comfortable and quiet. Or a Lexus, if you want to do Japanese, which you think I would prefer. Right, that's the thing telling me that I've gone across the white line, and you can feel it trying to tug it back, but of course there's a parked car, so you have to have your wits about you when you've got it on in fact I don't know whether that's just signalling, but I could certainly feel something. But yeah, so for a 20 grand or 22 grand, 23 grand car, whatever it is, this is super. It really is. And I've driven a lot of cars, and I have to say, I don't need to drive Fiestas and Renault Clios and all of the other things within this category, as they call it, because I've driven lots of luxury-ish cars, not the top super duper Rolls Royces and stuff, but practically everything else in the medium, let's say middle class income family type car, and I have to say this is super comfortable. And the best thing about it is I feel relaxed in the car. It's the way it's set up, everything's within touching distance. I don't need to lean over excessively, which you do in an X5. If you want to get to the glove box, you need long arms, stuff like this. On this one, it's just everything's here, and it's got all the trickery. It's got USB ports, and so on and so forth. 2 in the back, which I've got phone plugged into. It's kind of like a Pavlova's dog situation. If I plugged, so in the Peugeot, if I plugged my phone into the USB port in the front, it would automatically bring up Apple whatever player, and I didn't want that to happen, so I tended not to charge it. I don't know whether it does the same in here, because of the situation I had before. What I do now, what I've done here, is I've plugged it into the back seat, which is just, I'm assuming, a power port, and then I can choose what I do onto the navigation screen. But I'll tell you what, I'll try this Garmin navigation a little bit longer than one trip, but if it's as bad as calculating that, if I didn't know where I was going and roughly the route, I always put it on for diversions and stuff. But if I didn't know roughly the route I was going, this thing would have taken me to London and then to Torquay. Absolutely ridiculous. So I need to look at the set. I haven't read the manual though, so it's probably in there. It probably says something like, these are the settings, don't use toll roads, don't use this, avoid major car. I don't know. I tend to have these things, but I'm not, like most people, I don't bother reading the manual. I just like to get in and play with it. And even if I did read, to be honest, even if I did read the manual, so I'm just having to slow down for a camera. Even if I did read the manual, I wouldn't remember it all. You've got to get in and do it a few times. I'm completely happy now with the main gadgets that I'm going to use because I've used them today. There's a cancel button, so you can just, which is obvious. So whatever you've got on, if you don't want it on, you just press cancel. So if you try something out and you don't like it, just cancel it. There is I think I mentioned it earlier, but I'll just mention. I'll go through these points one by one at the end because I'll edit all this, and on the way back I'll do some forward-looking footage to give a bit of interest, rather than just me talking, and a view of the car and all that kind of thing. But the thing about the gadgets is I overtook a large HGV chemical truck thing, one of these like fuel Bowsers, and then it started flashing and beeping, and I could feel resistance on the wheel, but I don't know what it was trying to do to me, whether it was moving me away or into the truck. I think it spotted the fact that there was something big over near the front corner of the car. It was perfectly in the right lane, but in the middle of the right lane, wasn't drifting, nothing. So it does pick up these things from the side. Not a big deal, but you've got to have when I say you've got to have your wits about you, don't take your hands off the steering wheel. You need to be able to adjust it, but what you can do is you can relax them on the steering wheel, and when you do that, and it's kind of like popping bubble paper, it's somehow pleasing. Or watching slime, something like that. You keep your fingers like fairly lightly on the steering wheel and you can feel it adjusting the car, but you never know, that might be the cause of the absolutely appalling fuel consumption. I'd have been happy with this fuel consumption on my 1972 Viva, which I bought in the mid-80s, but I'm not happy on it on a modern car, not just a modern car, but a hybrid as well, an electric hybrid. An electric hybrid, I don't care whether it's got a 1.5 litre petrol engine in it or not, I expect it to be pretty good all round. Do you know what I mean? If I can genuinely get 45 miles to the gallon, it's got to be 45, because a non-hybrid car, a normal petrol engine car, will do that, smallish one. And then, like I said, BMW, if you put it into economy mode, that'll do 50. But it was diesel, so you expect it a bit more. And I do want to be green. I'll be honest with you, I don't know, this environmental stuff, I get the feeling it's a little bit exaggerated. It's not the end of the world, and if it is the end of the world, there's nothing we can do about it, because I think it's the US and China and Germany pump out more crap. And I think we're one of the better. I think we're top in the EU. Well, we're not in the EU, but you know what I mean. Within the EU member states, we were the top, except for a couple of small, I think Switzerland and Sweden, and all that stuff. But you could, they seem to be pretty serious about it. And when politicians start to get serious about it, like Boris and his missus, probably his missus, I tend to think to myself, well, there must be something in it. So, see, it's just done it again. There's nothing there. Crossing the white line, I think. When they get serious about it, you think to yourself, well, I just wonder whether there's something in it. And to be honest, at the end of the day, the main reason for getting a hybrid is to get better fuel consumption. And the second reason is do your bit. Do you know what I mean? So, you know, everyone's got one of those curtain switching friends who, you know, who's into all this green environmental stuff and all the rest of it, and they drive like a Land Rover. You know what I mean? So now that when I meet them down the boozer, I can say, well done, you're driving a diesel Land Rover that does about 10 to the gallon, and I'm driving or I'd like to be able to say, I'm driving a Honda Jazz Hybrid that does 50 to the gallon. At the moment I can't say that, although he doesn't know. It's telling me I'm doing 43.6 on average. Well, I just can't be. 40 litres in a tank, and let's say there were 5 litres left, which is approximately a gallon. So 35, so 7 gallons for 278 miles. It's in the 30s, that I'm sure. I mean, I'd have to work out with a calculator, but I think that's in the 30s. And whilst I'm not I don't do journeys like this a lot, and I don't spend that much money on petrol and fuel. I don't want to be conned. I don't want a car that you pay extra for, that you're expected to get, if they say 50 or I think 60, then I'm expecting to get 50, 45 at a push. This is telling me I'm getting 43.7, which I'd be happy with if I was, but I don't think I am. And I'm not being pernickety. I'm the least pernickety person. But you think about this: hybrid, electric hybrid, blah blah blah. First thing that comes to your mind. It's going to go crazy, and I wouldn't get one of these if I lived in Devon. The roads are not wide enough for 2 cars, barely. But yeah, so the first thing that happened. Oh fucking hell! This road's closed as well. Excuse my French. What the fuck? What are they doing? So I'll have to go this way. Anyway, to cut a long story short, because I am rambling a bit, which I tend to do especially when I'm driving on my own, talking to myself. Anyway, back to it. So the first thing that comes to your mind: electric hybrid, fuel economy, good for the environment as well, all well and good. But let's face it, how many people would buy an electric hybrid if it was double the price? Do you know what I mean? So you've kind of got miserable face. I even waved. That'd be the last time. So yeah, you wouldn't, would you? If it was twice. Fucking hell. That shut as well. Oh yeah, no, I know where I am now. Yeah, so if they said, oh right, it's good for the environment, blah blah blah, but it's going to cost you double, with all being diesels. So whilst I'm happy that it's better, well this one isn't, but I'm happy that it should be better for the environment. But the main reason I'm buying it is, not the main reason, but one of the reasons is because it's a hybrid. So my mate's party's right, so I'm here. Right, I guess I'll sign off for now. I'll edit all this together so you won't have to listen to quite the sort of rambling that I've had to actually do or have been doing. And the reason for that is because I've had to put the camera down, so I've got a wide angle lens, so I had to put it right in the corner to get any kind of, get me in the shot, because I'm not slim. I'm not a slim guy anymore. Right, I'm here. So, what was that? So that's been 295 miles. That's disgusting. In fact, I would go as far as to say that's appalling.